Good afternoon again. Welcome into the Senate Committee on Government Operations meeting of Thursday, February 12th, 2026. Our final item today is S-295. This is an act relating to group membership in the state employees retirement system. I believe we've already walked through this to some degree, but we've asked Cameron Wood to come back and again, just refresh our memory with a very high level view of it. And then we have some other witnesses to get to. So thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir. For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel, happy to be here. I can probably be relatively succinct in my comments at this point because they really can sum it up in this sense. If the committee understands where you want to go with this bill and some of the topics of this bill, I think there is a lot of detail that will then need to be fleshed out, wording between myself, probably JFO, and the retirement office with the state treasurer, retirement division with the state treasurer. But I think there's a lot of key questions to understand how you all would like to proceed with this in order for us to kind of draft that up and move forward. And so I'll walk through the language and then I'll highlight some of the things that you all would need to make decisions on if you're going to potentially move this forward. Let's share my screen. I just sent a request to share.
Going slow today. How's it coming up?
Says the host is not allowing sharing. So it says sharing is turned off if that means anything, but I can go ahead and start and at least walk through.
I got pulled up. It's just
So when you're looking at so it's 295, so it's as introduced. So section 1 is related to the definitions section, and what we're changing is group membership. As was mentioned, I think when you guys did your first walkthrough, the first few sections of this are really just technical cleanup on the definition of an employee. So you really have to go all the way down to page 5 before you get to the actual, first substance of what this change is going to do. And so what you have here is it's the definition of Group G membership in the definition sections. And currently you have certain individual employees that are in Group G, specifically employees of the Department of Corrections, employees who provide direct security and treatment services to offenders. So I'm looking at the first subdivision under Group G membership on page 4. So then following that, beginning of page 5, you also have employees that are sheriffs and deputy sheriffs, etc. They were put into Group G just a few years ago. And so then at the bottom of page 5, you have this new subdivision 3, which says the following employees that would be moved into Group G. And looking at the top of page 6, you have classified employees in the Department of Children and Families, Fire Academy site coordinators within the Division of Fire Safety, assistant state fire marshals within the Division of Fire Safety, force protection officers with the military department, and law enforcement certification and training coordinators within the Vermont Police Academy. So this is the first thing this bill is doing. So it's taking those individuals and it's putting them within Group G. The one thing I'm highlighting for you is that is an entire department that would be moving over, as it is all classified employees of DCF.
Senator White?
What is it's force military, whatever, I'm sorry.
Force protection officers with the military department?
Yes. Who are those people?
It's a great question, and I cannot answer that for you.
I think the SEA would have to answer that for us.
Okay.
I would ask either the SEA or the Department of Human Resources.
There were a couple of categories in here that I recall asking the SEA that question, but I don't remember which is which. So I don't want to give you information that is incorrect because I don't want to say that's those people when actually those people are one of the different categories.
But if I'm understanding correctly, the general frame is this is social workers under DCF would be everybody there. There's everyone in DCF. So that would be economic services,
So it would just be limited to the Department of Children and Families, but it's all of their classified employees. So everyone from, I don't know all their positions. You say social workers, but I mean, it could be admin staff, could be certain management positions. It's just every classified employee within DCF has that written.
Okay. And,
My understanding is that's, from what I've heard, is over 1,000 employees.
oh, thank you. You predicted my next question. But then one other question on this exact section, the last part, and law enforcement certification and training coordinators within Vermont Police Academy. Is this essentially accomplishing what we have in, trying to find the bill number? There's another bill. Would this be accomplishing that as well, to move the state police officers who are no longer officers but are training? Is this doing that essentially as well? Or was that the purpose of it?
So just to tackle that issue quickly, I did go back and listen to the testimony that you all took. I believe it was on January 30th. And you had representatives here from the VSEA who were asking to move certain police training positions under Group C membership.
Yes.
It wasn't Group G membership.
Oh, okay.
So I don't remember off the top of my head which training positions those were, but that would be moving them to Group C, not Group G, which is this. So I'm assuming different positions. I do have points about that, Mr. Chair. If you want me to comment on them now, it's not under this bill.
Yes.
I just want you all to be aware that there was a report that was issued in 2021. And it was led by the state treasurer at the time, where you all had this group evaluate, and I'm just quoting from the act at this point, you had this committee evaluate the requirements for and make recommendations on membership in Group C. So Group C is reserved for law enforcement and firefighters, and you had this entity back in 2021. The report was issued in 2021. You had them review membership at that time and determine whether or not people should be removed from Group C or whether there were positions outside of Group C that should be brought in. At that point, there were recommendations to remove certain positions. There were no recommendations to bring in other positions, outside positions. So I just want you to be aware of that report that was done not too long ago, like I said. The second thing I would comment on the police trainers is you need to understand that Group C has a mandatory retirement age at 55. These are for law enforcement and firefighters. And I think as very articulately discussed in this report, there is a federal law, let me make sure I get the acronym right, the ADEA, and it authorizes states to have a mandatory retirement age for individuals who are in certain positions, law enforcement and firefighters being among them. And so I'm just cautioning you that if you start moving in positions that do not have a primary purpose of law enforcement activities into a group membership with a mandatory retirement age, you're potentially running into some federal law issues. So I'm just wanting you all to be aware of those things for that piece.
Senator Bielanski.
But that's the request that came to them to Group C. Does Group G have a mandatory retirement age?
No.
Okay, so that is not an issue with what is in this bill.
That is
a potential issue with the ask that came to
Yes,
add those folks into Group C. It's,
Yeah.
I was really smart, that's
Yes, ma'am.
my bill.
Okay, so I just wanted you to know about that piece.
Yep.
You have this report, you potentially have some issues if you're gonna bring those individuals in with the mandatory retirement age piece. Not in this bill.
Okay.
And my understanding is, I'm assuming these trainers are separate from that request because it was a different request, but question for the SEA. Okay, so back to 295. You have adding in these positions, again, a significant number. So this is where I would defer to others to
Right.
comment on the potential fiscal costs associated with that, how that would work, et cetera. I'm just here to tell you it is a large number of individuals. The second piece I wanted to comment on is there are some provisions that are missing from this bill as it was introduced, that if you're going to move it forward, you should determine how you want to add in. And what I mean by that is the definition of a normal retirement date. I'm going to zoom that in just a hair. So this is something that I was not able to incorporate at the time. But so you have the draft as it is adding these individuals into group G, but then you have another definition under the same section of what is a normal retirement date and what does that mean? And so depending on, for example, looking at E here, this is, there we go. This is the language that was added in when you added the first positions into group G. So you have for positions that were in the system on or before 2008, that were still in the system as of 22 and made an election to move into group G, here's what their normal retirement date would be. And those dates change depending on when the individual first joined the state system.
Okay.
And so I'm bringing this up to say you will want to examine these normal retirement dates and figure out which ones you would like applicable to these positions if you move them over. Because they are different. The normal retirement dates in group G are different than they are for group F.
Understood.
Okay. So the last thing I will mention for this specific provision, which is about moving these people over into group G, is when you have done this in the past, the 2 times you have moved positions into group G, you have given those individuals the choice of whether to move or stay in the system that they are currently in.
Okay.
The first time you did it, it was about a year runway for those individuals to make that election. That election was irrevocable. They get one time, you can stay where you are or move over. When you did this the second time around, just 2 years ago, adding in the sheriffs, you gave a shorter runway. It was about 6 months, but that language is not here, and it may have been a misinterpretation on my part. I'm not sure. When you get to this section 3 here at the end, what I did was, because as I interpreted the request, it was to allow anyone who's going from group F to group G to remain in group F, and they have a year to make that decision. Anyone at any time. That is unique and doesn't exist for any other movement currently. And so the question I think you all would need to answer is, do you want that to be the case?
Mhm.
In which there's probably a lot of fleshing out to do with this section, administrative requirements of how that actually works. How do you cover, the costs associated with the different groups for people who are moving if they make elections? How do you retroactively deal with that, et cetera? So there's a lot of detail that would need to be worked out if you include this. What I may have misinterpreted is when you've moved people into group G in the past, as I mentioned, you give them that determination, that one-time irrevocable election. Do you want to stay where you are? Do you want to move to group G? There's nothing in this bill for these individuals, giving them that one-time election.
Okay.
And so that, again, may be something I just misinterpreted. If you're going to move forward with these positions, you should give them that one-time irrevocable election, set it out 6 months or a year, however much time you would like to give them. And we can draft that up because it's been drafted twice now previously for those people that we move things. So there's a few things here to flesh out depending on how you all would like to move forward. The only other thing that's here is I've mentioned section 1. We talked about section 3 is section 2. This is related to accidental and occupationally related disability retirement. The changes are here on page 7, where you have under B, it's removing the subdivision 1 and 2. There are others in the room who can probably better speak to the actual mechanics of how this is calculated. My understanding is if somebody has an accidental disability on the job and you have all of the conditions that have to be met in the subdivision A here, it has to be in the performance of their duty as a natural and proximate result of an accident occurring at a definite place and time, et cetera. So it's an on-the-job injury here. The individual can receive a normal retirement allowance, so now I'm on sub D. Normal retirement allowance if they've reached their normal retirement date. You got your normal retirement date, we're gonna give you your normal retirement. The rest of this is about what do you do when the individual hasn't reached their normal retirement date? And how do you calculate what their disability retirement should be? And one key piece that has been removed is this last piece on the bottom of 2, which is that allowance shall not be less than 25% of the member's average final compensation at the time of the disability retirement. So you calculate what they're going to receive based on how many years of service they have. And that could be a very minimal amount. And what this section does is it provides a floor of 25% that may have been an inadvertent deletion. So you may want to review whether or not to put that back in. So
It has been brought to my attention that I may have accidentally done harm with the way this language is crafted, and that was not the intent.
and I was not putting it on you. But so
I was
that may,
taking ownership.
that may be, that's something I'm flagging for you. You will determine whether or not that is what you would like if you're going to move it forward. And again, how that's calculated. I would tell you, I'd follow up with you in writing. If you don't have that description for me, others may be able to answer it off the top. So
Great.
I think I've covered the things that I wanted to cover with you all. Again, at the end of the day, I think key thing is figuring out whether this is policy that you feel that you want to move forward with. And then if that's the case, starting to flesh out a lot of that detail that needs to be fleshed out. So,
Very well. Thanks, Cameron.
you're welcome.
Let's move, if we could, to the Associate Fiscal Officer, Chris Wu from Joint Fiscal. You should also have on your desk his written testimony.
Hello, everyone. Chris Tripp from the Joint Fiscal Office. I was not going to share my screen, and I think I'll be brief because you all have my handout in front of you. But I think, bottom line up front is that JFO cannot quantify the cost of this bill pending actuarial analysis. This bill will have likely substantial financial impacts to both the retirement system and the PEP system. But in order to really put a price tag on that, the treasurer's office would need to engage with their actuaries and would likely require an appropriation to do so. I would certainly defer to them on what they think the cost of that scope of work would be. But based on prior scopes of work that we've done with JFO and the pension task force from a few years ago and everything else, I think $30,000 to $50,000 is a reasonable range to expect those kind of costs to fall into. I did just want to highlight a few things.
The cost to get the act.
To do the study.
Because I was gonna say 30 to 50,000 is not a substantial financial impact.
I guess that's in the eye of the beholder, but
No. But that's for the study.
For the
not
study.
the impact.
for the study, no, I expect the impacts of the retirement system will be orders of magnitude larger than $30,000.
I know, I just wanted to just clarify what you're talking
And-
about. That is
and-
substantial impact.
And why I think that's likely the outcome is this is a pretty substantial enhancement of the retirement benefit to a large group of people. And this would, more than double the size of Group G. There'd be more than 1,000 employees eligible for Group G, which currently has 580 some members in it. And the demographics of this group are likely significantly different than the members who are currently in Group G. So those of you who are around in, I think all of you were around when Act 114 happened. And Group G was costed out based on the demographics of the corrections workforce and the DMH workforce that was going to go into that system. The actuaries costed out what would it cost to make this enhanced benefit cost neutral to the state. So like how much extra would the member of Group G have to pay above and beyond what they would have paid had they remained in Group F to fund that higher cost of being in Group G? The actuaries calculated that sort of surcharge, for lack of a better word, to be 4.68%. So I would strongly recommend that if the legislature were to move forward with a significant expansion of Group G to cover different occupations, different demographic groups that are currently in there, that you also have the actuaries rerun that number to make sure it's adequate to fully fund the incremental cost associated with G based on that new membership. The other thing I wanted to point out was there will likely be an impact on almost certainly a higher cost on OPEB because for lack of a better, it really comes down to the fact that it's more expensive to provide a year of healthcare coverage to somebody who's not yet eligible for Medicare. So if you have more people retiring in the years prior to being eligible for Medicare and getting more benefit years prior to that, and that is a substantial cost differential.
Right.
So, and right.
Salaries will be higher and the length of service will be.
Yeah, that's more of an issue with the pension. With OPEB, the bigger issue is how many years are you going to be in retirement getting the
So
benefit?
if you retire younger, it'll be bigger drain.
Precisely.
When
And-
it's not just it's the full care, not Medicare and supplement, so it's more expensive.
Right. Before
More
you're
people
eligible.
retire when they're 50.
Exactly. And I just wanted to point out to everybody that I think the state, thanks to your efforts, have made remarkable progress at shoring up the condition of the retirement systems, not only for state employees and for teachers, but you've done so at a tremendous budgetary cost. And right now, the VSERS retirement system, the ADAC, including the plus payment for FY27 will be $153.6 million. So that is paid for out of a payroll charge of 16.6% of payroll. OPEB's unfunded liabilities are actually higher than the pension systems right now because we're just barely beginning to pre-fund OPEB. We're in like the fourth year of that. So the OPEB systems, their ADAC is $105.4 million. And that's being funded at a payroll charge of 12.17% of payroll. So the unfunded liabilities are pretty substantial right now. So that's all I have to say.
When was Act 114 passed,
2022.
22.
How could you forget?
I certainly can't.
So there's been 4 years now since then. So a fresh look at those numbers would probably be in order.
If there are going to be, so right now, this is the year that the pension systems are actually doing their every 3-year experience studies. So they're going to be doing a deep dive on the current assumptions that are in place and, whether or not there need to be adjustments. But should there be a substantial change in group membership as proposed here, that should also be looked at because that could alter demographic assumptions, retirement behavior assumptions, so on and so forth.
Senator Bielski.
Because the world of finance that we're talking about is not my world. What is the difference between an actuarial study and an experience study? If we're in the year when we have to do that, can we just roll this in?
There are two very different scopes of work that I think I would defer to the treasurer's office on, but so the actuaries do all this stuff.
That's what I thought.
They're the people who make a ton of money to run their fancy models and do all this stuff. But every year they do an annual actuarial valuation, and that's where they just look at what happened in the last fiscal year. And they put a price tag on that. Basically, that's when you figure out what's your funded ratio, what's your ADEC going to be for 2 years in the future. Then every 3 years, used to be every 5, but every 3 years they do a deeper dive because you don't want to adjust your long-term assumptions based on what happens in like 1 year. Like 1 year does not make a trend. So they'll take a look at the 3-year period and say, what has happened since the last study? What has happened in the world? Like, how good was our experience relative to those assumptions? And do we need to do a true up? And what prompted all of these conversations over the last 5 years was the experience study 2 years ago informed a decision to reduce the assumed rate of return from 7.5 to 7%. And that's what drove all the costs up and began this conversation. So sometimes it's like, I don't like using words good and bad, but like, it's not always a bad thing if the unfunded liability increases because you're doing something to make your assumptions more responsible. It comes at a cost, but like, it's way worse to just have an overly optimistic assumption to sort of suppress the cost at the budget because it doesn't go away. It just shows later with interest.
Yes.
And then what you're asking, I think of more as sort of like ad hoc work that we would ask the actuaries to do. Just like we asked them to do like 5 different scenarios, I think, when we did the task force, just to be like, how significant is this and does this warrant a bigger conversation? So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. They could maybe run on parallel tracks, but I'm not sure the retirement systems would. I think they might be more eager to pay for the experience study than they would be to pay for a study like this.
That is,
I think the general fund would probably have to pay for a study.
oh, no, I sort of assumed, I guess what I was trying to understand is how different what we're talking about is than what we're just already doing. Could
Yeah.
it just be an add-on if this
Bless you.
is a year in which we're doing that experience study anyways?
I would,
I've
I would for them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just, when you say things like experience study and actuarial study, I'm like,
Yeah, it's a lot of studies.
yeah, and they're all done by actuaries. So in my mind, I was like, are they not the same thing? The answer is no, not exactly. It's about as clear as mud.
You would not be faulted for coming to that conclusion.
Senator Clarkson.
Chris, I thought I heard you say that our unfunded liabilities were now growing again. Is that correct?
For OPEB, they are larger than the pension system and they have been growing. And some of that is due to our actuarial methodology because we're so early in the funding process that this is weeds, but
But the big mess, that's a concerning thing, given that we thought we'd sort of balance.
you're on a better track and you're gaining ground every year, but it's still a sizable problem to chip away at.
Which is why we're spending $153 million or hundreds of
On the
dollars a
pensions,
year,
yeah.
slowly
Mhm.
correcting that imbalance.
For the last 5 years, the funded ratio has improved, and that is a good trend to be on. And we expect it will continue to improve, unless there's something crazy happening in the economy.
What?
On OPEB, it's a little more complicated because healthcare cost trends keep going up, and that assumption keeps going up, and that drives up the liabilities. But we're also in like the 4th year of pre-funding, and the way we fund this, it's not like your mortgage at home where like you see the principal balance, creep down at the beginning and then really drop off. Like when you do level percent of payroll like we do, it actually goes up a little bit and then plummets down in the last like final decade. So there's a degree to which you would expect that unfunded liability to tick up. What you really need to worry about is like, is your funded ratio going the right way? And are your costs trending the right way in a way that you can sustain?
So with the 2 retirement systems, at one point, 2038 was the benchmark, I
Still
think,
is, yep,
where we're gonna be.
for the pensions and 2048 for the OPEB.
Is that still looking like that's a legitimate date or, because I had heard the same thing Senator Clarkson mentioned, that we were kind of not, the trajectory was not
Yeah,
as sharp as it was. at one point.
So I'm feeling fairly comfortable. I would say I'm consciously comfortable on the pension front in that we've actually seen costs as a percentage of payroll, which is really the best way to look at this, stabilize and actually come down a little bit. The fact that the legislature is putting these additional plus payments in is helping lower that rate of growth
Right.
in future payments. And, barring anything crazy happening, as a inflation adjusted percentage of the payroll of the overall state budget, pensions are going to be more manageable. I will say that as we get closer to 2038, there's a heightened risk of volatility if something wacky does happen. And the treasurer's office does have a proposal in a bill, H567, which is currently in Ways and Means, that would form a task force to come up with some options on what a future amortization policy might look like as we get closer to 2038. Because if something wild happens in like 2033,
Less time to react.
yeah, but due to timing, that impacts the 25 ADAC. So then you only have 3-4 years to spread that across. So I feel a little better on the pension side. I'm a little more concerned on OPEB, and that is because of healthcare cost trends. It's not immune to what's going on in the rest of the world, but we're so early in that pre-funding process that we've got a long way to go. We're crawling toward the finish line on that one. I mean,
Not running.
2048 is a ways away.
Okay, did you have a question?
We have fairly regular joint pension oversight meetings now, so we can kind of talk through this in greater detail there, I would imagine. I also, this is a statement less than a question. I don't know that the healthcare cost crisis is worldwide. It seems to be fairly unique in the United States. As the rest of the world has single payer healthcare. So that would also solve the OPEB problem.
Oh.
But that is not a conversation for you to navigate.
Thankfully.
Thank you, Chris. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, Tim, do you want to join us, please? Tim Duggan from the Treasurer's Office.
Devin, Director of the Vermont Retirement Systems. Thanks for having me today.
Sure.
to Talk about S295. And if I may, just on that last point, when healthcare costs are coming down, you'll see that in the OPEB, in the rate of increase in the annual OPEB costs. The 12% increase in the state OPEB costs this year, that is the system working. Our pre-funding system has to anticipate the rate of growth and projected future rates of growth. So it takes that into account. If we bend the curve on healthcare spending in Vermont and in the United States, that will filter down and will make a much better story on the OPEB side when we see our annual bill. So I think it is something that, seeing that big increase this year, it's tough to see, but it also, to me shows that it's working because we're making sure to put that money up front based on what we're seeing and what we're expecting to see.
It's better than 16.4%.
Yeah, but it is directly tracked to the, I mean, much like so many of the costs we're talking about, education funding, it's all linked to this out of control healthcare spending that we
So,
don't have a ton of control over.
and same with, it's not just in education, it's all the way through the administration of the Pay Act, everything. It's
So in terms of the bill, so I agree with what was said previously by Mr. Wood and Mr. Root. Appreciate their comments. I think based on my understanding of that there may still need to be some work on sections 2 and 3 to firm up the language with what the intent might have been. Maybe I'll just confine to section 1 if that makes sense to the committee for now. I agree with the points they raised on it. So I think some more work could be done there. With the increase to the size of Group G, that is something that presents a few things that we just like to make everyone's aware of, gentlemen, before kind of hit the big points. The first thing I point out is size. It's big. It's about a doubling of the size of Group G. So whenever we're doing something of that size, since I've been in the treasurer's office, the approach I've seen this body take, which I think is very responsible, is before making a benefits change to understand the costs, to truly understand the costs and fund those changes at the time rather than put them on the credit card and fund them periodically over time. So to the point Senator Bielski about the studies, the experience study is a very defined scope of work to look at our, existing assumptions for our existing suite of benefits among all of our members. When we're going to do something that's going to say change a benefit for one set of members, that is, as said, ad hoc work, and it's a very specific type of study because you're rather than just testing all of your general assumptions like mortality, retirement rates, investment rates of return. You're saying we have a population of individuals that have this benefit. We're going to move them to have that benefit. What is the relative cost of A versus B? And then we present that to you and then a conversation can be had about how to fund it, because at the same time, we are focused on providing benefits, appropriate benefits to all of our members. We're keenly aware of our funding schedule and making sure that we're providing you with all the information needed to make sure that we achieve the goal of full funding by 2038.
Yes.
Does it make it any less costly to do the extra study in a year when we're already doing the experience study than to do it as a stint? So the fact that they're here doing it, saying you also do this.
No bulk discount or anything. Yeah, it's different in kind. So really, we have them doing about half a dozen annual studies every year that were required under GASB rules to have done for financials and whatnot. Whenever we have let's think about something differently, that can be done anytime. And as long as we have a month to do it. And
people who are willing to think differently.
Yes. So, and that's something that we would expect to come. I don't feel is appropriate to come from the retirement fund. Whenever it's sort of a settler function is what we call it. It's when the plan sponsor is thinking about making a different change, that money comes from the plan sponsor, not the corpus of the fund. So that's why we seek an appropriation when and if there's going to be a proposed change of benefits to make sure that we present accurate cost data. So that's the sort of, and the size really does matter there. Part of why we did not rerun this study when we added the sheriffs is because it was such a small population and the study was so near in time, and the type of population, law enforcement, was more similar to corrections officers. So everything lined up where and frankly, as I think Senator Clarkson, you know very well, this the sheriff's concerns were such a long running issue that all the factors came together where I think it was felt that there was a unique opportunity to move to solve a long-standing problem. Here, we're going to have a very different kind of population. You know, it's different types of employees. It could include business officers, it could include, you know. And so the second point that I make there is I invite the committee to think about the theory of Group G, not to sound too like esoteric, but what is Group G? When proposed initially, it was there to solve a very discrete challenge for our correction workers who this body had already recognized as having that very difficult type of work that merited unique treatment. Before Group G, we had what's called the carve out, where there was a you know, if you retire early, there's a penalty, a financial penalty. It's called early retirement. It was waived for corrections workers and mental health workers. And so we were just taking that group of people that we knew like took a real physical toll, frontline workers, and sort of providing a new and enhanced benefit that got full retirement after 20 years. Kind of understood that theory. And when it was expanded to sheriffs, it was small, but it was law enforcement, and law enforcement always has 20 years. What concerns me a little bit as an administrator is sort of, you know, how do we think about this group? Is there a natural endpoint if this new group were to come in? Does that mean another group the next year? Each of these rollouts is very labor intensive for my team, who, you know, when we did the initial one, they were driving across the state in the winter to different prisons to make sure that we could educate our correction staff to make sure they're making informed decisions. We would expect to do, and you know, for any rollout, we would do that kind of work. But it's a lot of work, and that's sort of out of the ordinary. And it also creates, so that's secondary because that's just us, right? But for the members, it is confusing, legitimate. I mean, you saw that language on the, you know, the statutory language. This is legitimately confusing. We do it our best to make sure these changes are explained and understood.
In layperson language.
We do our best. And what I have experienced in my role is where these choices happen. Years later is where people can experience a lot of frustration. I've seen it. There was the state has changed from contributory to non-contributory plans in the past, many years ago. And it's years later when someone realizes that, wait, I picked A, but B would have worked out a heck of a lot better for me. And it's hard to quantify, but it's no less real. And it's something that my team does deal with.
Senator Clarkson first.
So on that note, life changes as a retired person. Do we, I mean, we've talked about opportunities to change what group you're in. Do we afford retirees an opportunity to change their group? No, we don't, which is so, I mean, I sort of understand that, but I don't really, because sometimes needs change and Chris maybe.
I was just going to say that I think, and I would defer to Tim, but I think there are real fiscal reasons why we limit that. And it's because the amount of money we put into the system is based on who is in what group.
And what our expectation is.
And what type of service credit they're earning based on those demographic assumptions. If you start changing group membership, that opens up a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fiscal risk.
So, and just to tag on that, which group has the largest number in it at the moment? F is the largest.
I mean, and F really is a composite group of F and F prime, which is, I guess we didn't make a new letter. We ran out of letters. Didn't know about G back in 2008.
Well, we all created G in 2000.
Well, we created F prime in 2008, and that's why we have F and F prime. So it took us another 14 years to
So there we go.
find feet.
So jumping back a little bit to some of the concerns about the size of this, and is this just going to keep happening every year? And certainly my intent was really to think about the other jobs in our state employee system that are significantly physically and mentally taxing and stressful and dangerous. And so I'm wondering if the language for the sort of DCF group is maybe not the right language to capture what I was trying to capture. And because really who the people I'm thinking of is our frontline DCF family services workers. And I don't know if I realize there's actually not a question there, but I don't know if that would ease the concern some if we thought about a different way to capture who I'm trying to capture, because what I recognize is, yes, corrections has really intensive. This is going to be something this committee has heard me say about a gazillion times. Corrections and law enforcement have really intense, stressful jobs, and so do other state employees that should have access to the same benefits that are often without much thought afforded to law enforcement, and not to, frankly, incredibly difficult and taxing jobs that are often predominantly women.
And I think we're speaking the same language. I think that's the reason for my invitation to kind of think about the theory of Group G. And, we have 8,000 or so state employees, and I don't pretend to know all the different types of jobs that are out there. So I think just understanding what universe you're really targeting before going to do any costing work is time well spent.
Yeah.
Because getting to the going and spending $30,000 on an actuarial study, and then, well, I actually didn't need these, folks, and then you see the actuary pulling their hair out because they can't, easily transfer one population for the other. That's sort of the point I'm emphasizing here. Again,
Okay. So you're actually suggesting what I just asked you. Yes, please refine the language. Think about what you're doing.
I think that, yes, I think that could be helpful.
Okay.
So I have a hard stop 2 minutes ago, because I have another meeting at 4. You're going to join us again tomorrow on another bill, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or maybe not a bill.
96,
Is it a bill?
property tax sales. Yep.
No, you're not.
No?
It's on the Group C.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you're right.
Which I guess
Yeah.
is that a bill? I
It's the
thought
one
we did
before
a
that.
I don't think it's a bill.
Is there a
Yeah,
house?
it's not a bill. It's a request to, as we've already talked about, if you're in Group C now and you become a trainer at the Vermont Police Academy, right now you move to F. The request is to leave them with C. So that's for Vermont. Right. Okay, committee, thank you. We're all set for the day, and we will reconvene tomorrow. As far as I know. Yeah, because the floor tomorrow's early. I was gonna say, if we took up the Budget Adjustment Act, it probably will take a little bit of time on the floor, but I don't think we're gonna do that till Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm not aware of this.
Because then we'd have second reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, divided, yeah.
So Tim and Chris and all the others in the room, Cameron, thank you very much for your time today, and we will adjourn for today and see all of you